Gradually, after holding his breath for too long, the lack of oxygen affected the ability of his brain to function effectively. His mind became a haze of confused inconsistency. Chapter 35 Reap What You Sow. Fate followed the all-powerful one through the darkness to Personificadia, back to the future's municipal headquarters. His omnipotence moved so quickly that Fate began to feel quite out of breath and a little disorientated. Once Fate had regained his equilibrium, he realized that he was in a room that was different to any of the other rooms in the building. A damp, dewy smell hung in the air, caused by the lack of ventilation, and Fate instinctively knew that he was in the basement. The subterranean room extended beneath the grounds of the building, which was the reason for its humidity, and made worse by the fact that the fresh air never seemed to find its way down there. He knew what went on in that dark, damp dwelling, and for that reason he stayed away. The only illumination in the room came from shafts of daylight glimmering in through the ceiling. The light entered via glass-covered domed manholes situated in the rear grounds of the magnificent headquarters. Fate found himself thinking back to less than an hour ago, when Woody was trying to see through the glass domes. He wished he had never shouted at his young, innocent friend, and he wished he had made it clear early in their journey just how important it was to stick to the rules and follow the schedule. Each beam of light shone onto specific areas of importance in the chambers. One of the shafts of light illuminated a throne-type seat, above which were the words, "His Omnipotence." Just in front of Fate, another beam of light shone onto a raised plinth, which housed a small wooden block resting upon the top. Fate had to lean forward a little in order to make out the two words which were carved into the block. They read, "The Accused." As the door marked chambers opened, the lights came on and the whole room lit up. A voice ordered, "All rise," and then a shrouded figure entered the room and sat down on the throne. Only now did it become clear that Nemesis and Providence were situated on the bench, one at either side of his omnipotence. And it now became clear that there were a dozen more seats upon which were sat various privileged entities. A hand gave Fate a shove until he was situated in the dock. The same voice called for order, and proceedings began. Fate stood in silence while the court advocate read the charges against him. Gross misconduct. Conspiracy to pervert the course of nature. Fate's head was bowed as he looked at the floor with unfocused eyes. The charges continued. Failing to exercise due care and attention while carrying out unsanctioned duties. Fate looked toward the advocate for the first time since proceedings began. Jobsworth, the bad-mannered clerk from reception, stood there with the charge sheet in his hands. He continued to levy the charges against Fate. "Theft! Theft!" exclaimed Fate, incredulous that such an accusation should be brought against him. Fate was cautioned over his outburst and warned not to interrupt proceedings again. The charge was explained, repeated, and a new one was added. Theft of a watch. Contempt of the court. Fate bit his tongue, fearful he may cause more charges to be added to the long list. The accusations continued. Careless supervision of a minor. His Omnipotence raised his hand, interrupting the court advocate. A very serious affair, the incident with the herbs, he pointed out, leaning forward and directing his comments directly at Fate. Fate felt like apologising, but dared not speak. The advocate put the charge sheet down and smiled ever so slightly, as if to let Fate know that he was not so clever after all. His Omnipotence looked at Fate and then at Joseph and shrugged. What about the charge of fraud of modifying two future documents? As though Fate was not facing enough charges already. The clerk most respectfully reminded His Omnipotence that no two entities could be tried for the same offence, as each entity was accountable for their own actions. He further reminded the all-powerful one that the charge of falsifying two documents had already been accounted for. Was all that was forthcoming from His Omnipotence. He nodded his head rhythmically at Joseph, smiled, and then expressed the turn of phrase once more. It was time for Fate to respond to the charges levied against him. He thought about trying to justify his actions by pointing out the substantial progress and excellent results which he had made with the boy and Evan. He realised, though, that there was no point in trying to influence His Omnipotence after witnessing the absolute indifference which he had displayed while performing his duties with the repercussions. Fate resigned himself to the fact that whatever he said would not alter the outcome of the all-powerful one's decision. Rather than deny the allegations and prolong the proceedings by trying to refute the evidence, Fate admitted his guilt. Then, as an act of concession, he simply stated, "I am the cause of all my effects." Sentence was passed. "To the chambers," ordered His Omnipotence, and Fate was led away. Shame, thought Nemesis, but she now breathed easier, knowing that Fate would not be around to make accusations which could implicate her in the role of Temptation's earlier heinous crime. Providence felt a genuine empathy for Fate, and she wished that she could repeal the harshness of Destiny's ruling. Rules are not designed to be overridden by whichever entity decreed that their case was the exception, she told herself, deciding that it would be in her own best interest to remain silent. All the low-ranked entities in the courtroom followed Providence's lead and waited until they were clear of the basement before expressing their own opinions. Tittle-tattle and rumours could hardly wait to vacate the courtroom. The sealing chambers consisted of a huge room containing large glass vessels, 20 in all. The glass vessels rose into the air 3/4 of the height of the room. The diameter was a little more than the length of an entity's reach from fingertip to fingertip. The only way into the cylindrical vessels was via a curved glass door. Next to the edge of the door were 3 buttons. From inside the shroud came a hand, and the button marked open was pressed. The door hissed viperously as the vacuum seal was broken. The curved glass door stood open and around the exterior of the vessel. Again, the shrouded figure remained silent while his hand gestured that Fate should enter the vessel. He obeyed. The button marked closed was pressed. The door slid back into its original position and then hissed as it resealed. Fate anticipated the worst and was not denied his expectations. One press of the remaining button marked seal, and the vessel began to fill. A non-setting sealant entered the cylinder through a glass tube which ran up its inside almost to the top. The clear sealant rose quickly and ominously and was soon at the height of Fate's waist. As the ever-increasing volume of the sealant moved up his body, Fate twisted to one side as he began to struggle, leaving him facing an adjacent vessel. Fate's concern for his own welfare momentarily subsided as he stared into the other vessel, trying to see through its sealant. "No, no, no," he implored. Thousands of minuscule bubbles made it difficult to at first be certain as to the identity of the poor soul that had already been dealt with earlier. It was the brightness of the red jacket that made Fate realize who it was that paid the price for helping him. "Oh, no," he sighed, on seeing the pitiful sight of the entity who had put his freedom and existence on the line for friendship. "Fortune, my dear friend, I am so very sorry." The liquid around Fate kept rising, and his attention reverted back to his own plight. It was only when the thick liquid resin approached his throat that Fate really began to struggle. His desperate efforts amounted to nothing more than a hopeless attempt to delay the inevitable. Fate was twisting and turning, slower and slower, with increasing difficulty, as he tried to raise himself above the resin, which was determined to make him pay the price for his indiscretions and for breaking protocol. As a consequence of his failings were so close that Fate accepted his inevitability, the importance of his own predicament faded into an unnatural insignificance. The moment that he learned about Evan's mum dying of cancer entered his mind. For one last selfless moment, Fate was upset about the boy and how he would feel when he learned of her condition and imminent death. As the liquid began to approach his mouth and his nose, Fate took in one last desperate breath of air to fend off drawing the sealant into his lungs. Gradually, after holding his breath for too long, the lack of oxygen affected the ability of his brain to function effectively. His mind became a haze of confused inconsistency. He wondered what time it was and wished he could see the splendid gold watch which his mother had bought him for his 21st birthday. He then got upset that the number 12 was the wrong way round. "I wish I had another piece of that chocolate cake, even though it was squashed," he confusedly reminisced. The weight of the sealant, combined with the fact that it was still rising, was too much for Fate to cope with any longer. Finally, all hope of escape evaporated as the liquid engulfed him, leaving Evan and Woody's fate sealed in his own consequence. The molecules of the liquid were enriched with thousands of oxygen atoms, which allowed Fate's skin the ability to soak in the minimal amount of oxygen which was needed in order to remain alive. In one last heinous condemnation of Fate's impotence, he would remain in this semi-conscious state, alone with just his jumbled-up thoughts to keep him company. Like a forsaken sufferer of Alzheimer's disease, his thoughts would wander around the corridors of his muddled-up mind until the passing of Evan released him. "3 down, 1 to go," declared his Omnipotence, in a voice which demonstrated that he was merely carrying out his duties. Then he turned and left the chambers, hurrying away to the edge of the darkness in pursuit of Evan.